Hello, my name is Caitlin White, and this begins my digital reflections presentation for my Cornerstone seminar at Charter Oak State College. In review, I've been asked to go over my research topic for this class. We were asked to write a research paper on a topic of our choice. My thesis for that topic was, of the causes of climate change, planetary degradation due to overuse is the biggest threat to life on Earth. And beyond that, to reflect on the course itself, and to me the most impactful piece was Foundations of Academic Success, that we were asked to read different passages and excerpts, chapters from that text. So my chosen research topic, why did I choose it? I'm a runner, I'm a hiker, I'm a camper. In general, I'm a lover of planet Earth. Climate change, and specifically more recently, planetary overuse, has been something that's on my mind constantly. I've watched a lot of documentaries, a lot of articles, and taken a lot of interest in this topic. So when we were asked to write a research paper on our choice, that was the first thing that popped into my mind. So my research topic begins really with human population. The Earth's human population has grown from around 1 billion in the year 1800 to around 7.5 billion people in present day. And humans make up just 1.1% of known life on Earth, while plants make up 83%. But since humans have dominated the planet, we have seen a loss of 50% of plant species and the significant losses of animals and land. You'll see in the image that I included from an article from Vidal about the loss and damages that have taken place to animals and plants. And I like to point out too that animals and plants are our main source of food. We might think about the surface of the planet simply in terms of the land itself, but not really taking into consideration what's on that land that we need, not just for our survival in terms of, water and a habitable climate, but what we need to live and eat. Of our planet, what elements are affected? So the ocean and water in general, habitable land, and then of those things, how does that impact human health? So one of our biggest issues is ocean overuse. Throughout the generations, humanity has focused on overfishing, or rather fishing, as a big source of food. So we know the ocean takes up 70% of our planet, and from that we find a lot of food, not just in animals and fish, but also in plants. And overfishing is a huge problem. In addition to that, ghost fishing. Now, not a lot of people are aware of ghost fishing or know exactly what it is. Ghost fishing is nets and traps that are lost by fishers into the oceans. So if there's a storm, or simply a net just tears, or a trap is lost, it falls to the ocean. And because nets and traps changed from biodegradable materials like cotton and hemp in the 70s to materials like plastic, it takes far, far longer for these to degrade. And so they remain in the ocean, catching animals and fish, and killing them because they're unable to escape. And even their dead bodies then attract more fish and more animals, which then in turn get caught. Overfishing is also an issue because a lot of overfishing has to do with illegal fishing, which I'll talk about later. So with land overuse, what I wanted to focus on was specifically desertification. Because land overuse tends to have to do with clearing of the land, so whether it's the rainforest or simply cleaning up desert lands, it's a huge problem. So my example that I used in my research paper was the Dust Bowl. I had watched the Ken Burns documentary on the Dust Bowl years ago, and it stayed with me beyond. And the Dust Bowl took place in the 1930s in the central United States in the Great Plains. As we know, in the 1930s, there was a huge recession and a lot of monetary issues, but just prior to that, the government had incentivized farmers to farm in the Midwest, a place that had not yet been cultivated. But what they didn't know is that the arid grasses that were there took thousands of years to develop and helped stabilize the land in this arid climate. So these inexperienced farmers, or suitcase farmers as they were called, came in, cleared the land, and didn't maintain natural land barriers and wind barriers like trees and these natural grasses. At the same time, a huge drought, one of the worst droughts in known history, hit this portion of the country. So the Dust Bowl probably would have taken place had there not been a drought, but it may not have been as severe. And because of this desertified the land. So huge dust storms like we see in the Sahara and the Gobi Desert, and in places in Australia were happening in the middle of the United States, which had never happened before. To stop this, the government became involved, but one of the biggest things that helped stop this was really tapping into the Ogallala Aquifer that runs down the central United States. Now, one of the big issues is that this aquifer is running out quicker than we can replace it, which I'll touch on later. And all of these impacts, as I mentioned before, humans. According to the World Health Organization, the potential impacts of desertification on health include higher threats to malnutrition from reduced food and water supplies, more water and foodborne diseases that result from poor hygiene and lack of clean water, respiratory diseases caused by atmospheric dust from wind erosion and other air pollutants, and the spread of infectious diseases as populations migrate. All of these health impacts took place during the Dust Bowl. So there was obviously reduced food and water because of the drought and because the farmable land was desertified. There were diseases like dust pneumonia that took hold and did kill some people, specifically older and younger people. And populations did migrate during this time. While 75% of people did stay during the Dust Bowl, shockingly, about 25% of them left. And they fled to parts of the country looking for food, but also looking for work. The world has experienced desertification on a large scale before, but these changes occurred over thousands of years. Historian Donald Worcester considers the Dust Bowl in the top 5 environmental disasters because it took place on a human scale, meaning it occurred over 40 or 50 years. When we reflect on the Dust Bowl, we are also reminded of the continental scale in which this disaster took hold and how lucky the United States is to have implemented solutions that worked in the face of severe land degradation. This event is also a reminder of how quickly circumstances can change when land degradation begins. I'd say of all of the things that I wrote about in my research paper, this was one of the biggest takeaways. We think about the world as having unlimited resources and that it can sustain any quantity of life of any species, animal, plant, amphibian alike. But in reality, we need to be more cautious of how quickly we're using up the resources because we're now using them more quickly than they can replenish themselves. So of the counter-arguments, fishing less was one of them, but illegal fishing is estimated to take about 30% of fish caught. There's been no system developed to identify fish that have been caught illegally. Passing laws that limit fishing by law-abiding fishers might only increase illegal fishing by increasing the cost and demand for fish. It's also mentioned that biodegradable nets might be a fix, but biodegradable nets will still entrap sea life before they degrade, lessening the problem but not eliminating it. And a lot of people like to talk about how the Dust Bowl was corrected. And as I mentioned before, the Ogallala Aquifer was used to provide irrigation to crops. But the old Gulf aquifer took thousands of years to fill, and is becoming depleted faster than it can replenish itself, with no end to human dependence in the immediate future. And while outputs in the central and southern parts of the aquifer are declining due to excessive pumping and prolonged droughts, have parched the area, bringing back Dust Bowl-like storms. Humans have a history of prioritizing short-term gains without considering long-term environmental effects of their land and water. Ultimately, what I realized is the choice humanity faces is action or inaction. When thinking about planetary degradation, as I mentioned, humans think selfishly about their own survival and their immediate needs. The Earth has been here before humans and will be here for billions more years. But do humans living on the planet want to cultivate an environment hospitable to the survival of living things? So my research reflections. Now in hindsight, I said this in some of my discussions and to our instructor that I might have chosen a different topic had I thought about it again, but I think there's a certain point where, you know, there's no turning back. You've invested your time and effort into it, and even if it doesn't come out exactly how you wanted it to, you need to see it through to the end. And this was definitely a great practice of getting back into the swing of things. I haven't been in school for about 4 years, or more specifically college. I would have graduated college in spring of 2009 when I originally went, and I've gone back for a semester here or there. But I really found this beneficial, while resistant, to, again, helping myself get back into the swing of things. It's nice to practice and reanimate skills in a safe place to fail and make mistakes. I really looked at this course in that way. I'm someone who always wants to do well and always wants to excel in everything that I'm doing. But I figured if there's any course, again, to have a safe space to fail and make mistakes, that it was going to be this one, to get myself off on the right foot, to get those mistakes out of the way, to get those failures out of the way, put them behind me so I have nowhere else to go but up. But ultimately, in the end, I was glad to have chosen the topic that was important to myself, and I know to other people in class and around the world in general. With the release of the UN's recent study, which I did lean on for my paper, came out just in time. I know that it's more important than ever. So even if my observations weren't precisely or didn't go precisely as I would have liked them to, I'm really glad I had the opportunity to research this topic and took the time to research it. I had a speech class, oral communication class rather, that I took at the same time as this one, and we had to do a persuasive presentation as one of our many presentations. And having researched this topic, I always thought it was perfect timing to use this. And I presented this in front of some of my coworkers, and they said it was the best presentation that I had done yet. So that was really great to hear and really inspiring. And I was glad to have shared the topic with them because it's only educating more people. I really enjoyed Foundations of Academic Success. As an adult learner, I am a big supporter of lifelong learning in general. So whether someone's going back to school for their bachelor's like I am, whether someone's getting their master's, their PhD, or just in general, gaining more information. I know I've mentioned a lot in all of the podcasts that I listen to, and I try and listen to NPR, the news every day, try to stay up to date with current topics, but just expand my knowledge in general. I like to be able to talk to almost anyone about almost anything, and I know that going back to school is just going to add to that. Some of the quotes from the Foundations of Academic Success that I found the most impactful were, some may believe that success looks like a straight and narrow line that connects the dots between where you are, where you're going, but the truth is that success looks more like a hot mess of twists, turns, curves, bumps, and hurdles, and alternate pathways. The next quote is, when seeking out challenges, there's always the possibility of agonizing defeat, but out of the defeat can be the seeds of great success in the future. All I ever wanted to be was an elementary school teacher until I went to college. Do not let your college degree define who you are, but rather let the knowledge and skills that you've acquired define who you are. And I really felt all of this spoke to me personally, originally going to school for architecture, returning to school for health science, and then for graphic design, and now for healthcare administration. I'm someone who has a lot of interests, but what I've come to realize in my life is that the knowledge and skills I've acquired through work, through all of my education endeavors, are really what defines me. Ultimately, I'll have a degree in healthcare administration, which I know will be useful for my current career, for any future aspirations that I have. But I also felt like it was going to give me a very well-rounded experience and something I could lean on no matter where my career took me. And as I mentioned before, I felt like this class was a great opportunity to give students a safe place to fail. And it sounds like a negative thing, but it truly is positive. I think making mistakes is the best way to learn. While we don't want to make mistakes, I think that sometimes it's our mistakes or even the mistakes of others that help us learn. I've been tasked with training a lot of new coworkers that are coming on board, and I try to remind them that me telling them what to do or what not to do is not me trying to make them like me or put them in a box per se, but show them the mistakes that I've already made so they don't have to make them themselves and maybe avoid them in the future. And I think that's really true. I know I've made some mistakes in this class, and I know I've seen some other mistakes made by other students in this class. And I like seeing other people's mistakes, not because I'm putting them down by any means, I never would, but because it will help me avoid mistakes in the future. We can learn from other people's mistakes without having to make them ourselves, and I hope that some of my mistakes will help others be more mindful in the future. You don't know what you don't know, and I think this course has really helped me and provided me a good foundation, without being too literal, the foundations of academic success going forward. The following slides are all of my work cited for not only my research paper, but for this presentation, for the images that I used, and for the text that I provided. For the foundations of academic success, I included an in-slide citation. I also filled out my review of this course, and as I mentioned in the beginning, I was hesitant taking this course because I know I've always been a good student, but through the mistakes that I've made and the mistakes that I've learned from, I really needed this course to help me get into the swing of things, get my head back into school. Whether someone's just come off of taking a different class or going to a different school, or someone's starting back at school like me after many years of not having gone to college. This is just great practice, and I know practice makes perfect. Sometimes it's hard to remember. And that's it. Thanks for an awesome experience, and I can't wait to continue my education at Charter Oak.